Welcome to the Monday, April 26, 2021 meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. Please go to WCSOH.org/virtual BOE. And from that page, you can also watch the meeting via YouTube live stream. Though providing an opportunity for public comment during school board meetings is not a requirement, the Westerville City School District Board of Education believes it is an important part of its engagement with and accountability to the community. As part of our mitigation efforts to slow the spread of the coronavirus and in the spirit of maintaining an opportunity for our public to participate in these virtual school board meetings, we are offering interested persons an opportunity to submit written public comment. During a typical Westerville City School District Board of Education meeting, there are two opportunities for individuals to address the board. While functioning under this virtual meeting environment, the opportunity to submit public comment will open when the meeting begins at approximately 6 p.m. and close shortly after each public comment section is reached on the agenda. Per Board Policy 0169.1, each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes in duration. When submitting your comments through the provided forms, we ask you to please keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals by name in the event of a complaint. You may use the links provided on the district website to submit your comments for a specific agenda item or comments of a general nature. All comments submitted become a matter of public record and are subject to release under Ohio law and the Federal Freedom of Information Act. As with in-person public comments made during a traditional school board meeting, members reserve the right to respond immediately or withhold comment in order to conduct appropriate research and follow up with the speaker at a later time. Thank you in advance for your understanding and cooperation. The meeting is now called to order, and Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman? Here. Mrs. Davidson? Here. Mr. Velardo?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker? Here. Mr. Bell?
Here. Agenda item 3.01, would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda item 4.01, to temporarily suspend board policy, PO. It is. Okay. Agenda item 4.01, to temporarily suspend board policy, PO 0169.1, public participation at Board of Education meetings. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Agenda item 5, district highlights and recognitions. The Spring A+ Awards. Mr. Velardo?
Thank you very much, President Bell. It is our honor to recognize the Spring 2021 A+ Awards. This evening, the Spring 2021 A+ Award winners will be recognized in just a moment with a video, and each award winner will receive a trophy and a copy of their nomination, which will be hand-delivered tomorrow. Just to let you know, the A+ awards are given to staff who distinguish themselves through a single or an ongoing demonstration of exemplary performance. The selection committee's decision is guided by how each nominee's actions demonstrate support of the district's mission statement, which is, quote, to prepare students to contribute to the competitive and changing world in which we live, a willingness to go above and beyond normal expectation in support of students, and behavior consistent with one or more of the district's values, including respect, inclusiveness, community, communication, collaboration, innovation, nurturing, trust, and accountability. The committee chose 10 individuals to be recognized this evening, one of whom wished to not be recognized publicly. Those being recognized include Michael Henderson, Megan Solomons, Holly Kinder, Jody Kuhnfair, Carol Hanley, Amanda Breckenridge, Valerie Thompson, Fevin Waldeep, and Jeff Bracken. At this time, Jill, I believe you have a video you're going to show.
Introducing the 2021 Spring A+ Award winners. A+ awards are presented to employees who distinguish themselves through a single or ongoing demonstration of exemplary performance. From Faust Elementary, Carol Hanley. Carol was nominated by parent Colleen Holton, whose nomination reads in part, Mrs. Hanley has gone above and beyond what is expected of a teacher, not only for my son Eli, but for all of her students. Eli enthusiastically calls Mrs. Hanley a super nice and cool teacher, especially when she cut up pool noodles to make drumsticks for the kids to use in class as a fun activity. As a parent, Mrs. Hanley is the most responsive teacher I have ever met. Although I've only known Mrs. Hanley since January when Eli transitioned back to school, I've sung her praises to friends and family. It makes me smile knowing Eli and all of her students are so well cared for while at school. She is deserving of this honor without a second of hesitation. From Hawthorne Elementary, Michael Henderson. Michael was nominated by Eric Indiciani, whose nomination reads in part, Michael has shown exceptional leadership this year while narrating the majority of Westerville's K-5 physical education remote learning videos. His charisma, calm demeanor, and deep knowledge of our subject matter has prepared every Westerville City School District K-5 student to contribute to the competitive and changing world in which we live. He always conducts himself in a professional manner while also showing that fun-loving side. Michael Henderson epitomizes the district's values. From Mark Twain Elementary, Amanda Breckenridge. Amanda was nominated by parents Julian Lang, Heather Ivory, Natalie Martin, and Abby Gibson, whose nominations read in part. Miss Ivory shares, she is my daughter's third grade teacher. At my house, I regularly hear these words from my daughter. Mrs. Breckenridge taught me this, and that is something every parent appreciates. Miss Lang shares, it has been a really tough year for teachers, school personnel, and parents who have become assistant teachers at home. School is really challenging for my son, and Mrs. Breckenridge works really hard to make sure each day is a positive one. From Natalie Martin, she shares, Amanda is teaching the whole class about social justice, equality, and how to become an ally. When I asked my daughter what she loved most about Mrs. B, her response was priceless. Mommy, Mrs. B is calm and fair. Miss Gibson shared, Mrs. Breckenridge has been very supportive and outgoing with teaching my son. My son recently walked away from a meeting on Cloud 9 and looked forward to spending the year with her, and in fact said, this is going to be the best year yet. Mrs. B is a shining light for us during this difficult year. From Mark Twain Elementary, Fevin Waldeab. Fevin was nominated by parent Jillian Ling, whose nomination reads in part, I believe that Fevin goes above and beyond on a daily basis. My son has diabetes and autism and visits the clinic quite often. With my son's challenges, he needs someone safe, loving, and calm, and Thebin embodies all of those characteristics. She always has a smile on her face and a willingness to help when needed. She has given me the peace of mind that he is getting the extra mama type of love when I can't be there to give it to him myself. She has a heart of gold. She makes Rogan feel as though it is okay to get upset and have all of the big emotions he has, and never lets him feel embarrassed or bad when things happen that are out of his control. For McVeigh Elementary, Jody Kuhn-Fair. Jody was nominated by Olivia Bechtel, whose nomination reads in part, Jody is an absolutely outstanding human, professional, and co-worker. As an instructional aide who has seen students with significant needs socially, emotionally, and academically, her love and passion for their success never wavers. She leaves a positive, lasting impact on the lives of all those she encounters, and I will be forever grateful for the one she has left on mine. Point View Elementary, Megan Sammons. Megan was nominated by Kelly Ogletree, whose nomination reads in part, Megan is the embodiment of Westerville City Schools values. She is the ultimate team player, working hard to collaborate with her colleagues, but the most important aspect of Megan's professionalism is the specialized knowledge that she has of every student she works with. As a colleague, I am in awe of Megan's professional knowledge and her work ethic. As a parent, I am enamored with her rapport with every student and the care and compassion she shows for every student she works with. She is everything I hope my children will get to encounter during their education. From North High School, Jeff Bracken. Jeff was nominated by parent Amanda Smith, whose nomination reads, Mr. Bracken has gone above and beyond to make sure his AP Chem classes receive the benefit of learning the hardest part of the subject in class. He splits his lessons each week, teaching in class and remote 2 separate lessons, then flips the next week to ensure both cohorts get the attention they need to learn difficult concepts in person. He also devoted extra time to record multiple videos per week since students weren't able to do labs from home. From North High School, Valerie Thompson. Valerie was nominated by Jennifer Carlson, whose nomination reads in part, Val is a school nurse. The majority of her time is spent at Westville North High School. She is a frontline worker who selflessly prepared our school, educated our staff, students, and family to return to a safe environment and return to normalcy as best as possible. She provided vital structure, safety protocols, and education to allow all parties to stay safe in school, but also when they return to their community and home and return back into the schools. Nurse Val has worked tirelessly and endlessly, keeping our clinic and COVID rooms prepared and sanitized to help and assist any and every student or staff member. She is invaluable and an integral part of our students, families, staff, school, district, and community. In my mind, no one is more deserving of the A+ award than Nurse Valerie Thompson. From Wilder Elementary, Holly Kinder. Holly was nominated by Dr. Victoria Hazlett, whose nomination reads in part, Holly is truly one of Westerville City Schools' unsung heroes. She goes about her work in such a quiet, humble, efficient manner that often her value to our school community is not given the recognition deserving of her contributions to the health and safety of our families and staffs. I have observed Holly grow into her position with confidence and competence, creating a calm, quiet, nurturing space for children and often adults as well. Holly takes advantage of every opportunity to expand her knowledge and skills, even coming in on her days off to participate in professional development with a school nurse. At a time full of unknowns, Holly was a calming influence within our school community. Her courage and perseverance through a year of unpredictability and constant change is why I believe Holly is most deserving of the A+ award.
Congratulations to our Spring 2021 A+ award winners. On behalf of our Board of Education and our entire school community, I want to say thank you for the many outstanding extras you provide to our students every day. It cannot be overstated that your commitment and generosity to others was even more impactful during this challenging year. So, I say thank you, and we're glad to have you here in Westerville City Schools, where you belong.
Thank you for allowing us to take time, President Bell, to honor those Spring A+ award winners. And in honor of our colleague, Jennifer Altman, I think we should all give some applause to these people. you remember at our last meeting, Mrs. Altman said we should do the applause thing, and I think that's a great idea. And Dr. Kellogg, you said exactly how I was going to end it, and perhaps this year more than ever, how grateful we are for these folks who have gone above and beyond. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the board. Congratulations to all of those award winners. President Bell.
Thank you, Reverend Villardo, and congratulations again to all of our award winners for so much great work. Moving on to agenda item 6.01, approval of the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Monday, April the 12th, 2021, as presented. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Ms. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nessa Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 7.01, a staffing update that will be provided by Dr. Kellogg.
Thank you, President Bell, members of the board. It's my pleasure to provide a little glimpse into some of our priorities for hiring as we go into the school year. It's hard to believe, but it is. We're sneaking up on May, and this is that time of year. We're thinking about the 21-22 school year and additional staff. So I'm just going to present a snippet of information tonight and kind of high level. A snippet in that this is really just representative of additional hires. These are new positions. We're expanding, where we're going to expand our staff in a couple areas. This doesn't include replacement of retirees or people who exit. That's a different part of our staffing. And nor does it talk about those who've been on leave who are going to opt into positions as they return from leave. So this is really about where we're expanding our human capacity or human resources across the system. And I think you'll see some of it is clearly reflective of what we found this year and what we know about our kids moving forward. So, Jill, if you'd hit the next slide. So within the instructional domain, I'm not giving numbers, et cetera. I'm just kind of laying out some of the areas. As you know, prior to this school year, we had a position at North at the shop. And that individual worked in the shop, worked with students as part of the engineering program, and we were growing that position into helping our engineering classes across the high schools and middle schools become a big part of our curriculum. And so we actually repurposed that position this year during COVID to support the WVA. With the end of the WVA, we're transitioning that position back to where it was, so we'll be rehiring there. One of the areas where annually we have to take a close look at to make sure we're consistent with all the regulations and compliance as it relates to special education. We'll be doing some hiring there. Some of it we know up front, some of it as numbers change, we may need to fluctuate. So we'll see some teacher hiring there and some aides there to support our students in our special education program. For the last 2 years, we've had a position at the middle school that's been part of working with teachers in kind of an instructional coach model to support the transition to the middle school model. That was being paid for through a federal grant through our title funds. We're going to transition that position over to the general fund going into the school year. This is similar to what we do at the elementary with our instructional coaches who work job-embedded PD directly with our teachers. So we want to continue that practice at the middle school as well with that position. So we'll be posting that position moving into next year. And then, as you know, we've done added some resources in some areas where we want to increase our capacity and also provide more teacher leadership in our system. So as you know, equity has been a big part of our work this year. We actually were able to take Sherry Chafin and bring her up part-time as splitting her time between instructional coaches here and supporting Cynthia DeVise in her equity work. We're going to make that a permanent position going into next year. It'll be a full-time teacher on special assignment assigned to work with Cynthia in equity, and that person will be Sherry Chafin moving forward. So we're excited to build that team and provide some additional resources to provide leadership across the system. So as we continue our work there. We're also going to be creating a teacher on special assignment, what we call a TOSA position, around professional development and resident educator. This is really a position we already have in place that's retiring, Lisa Kuhar, who has done great work with our resident educator program. We're going to take that position. The resident educator program is slimming down a little bit, so we're going to take that and couple that with professional development. Again, this is a teacher position, and so in both these cases, what we're looking for, teacher voice into the system to help us as an organization bring that voice into our decision making and our program development moving forward, particularly as it relates to professional development, which is such an important piece of the work for our teachers. So that's some of the new positions in the instructional side. Next slide, Jill. On the support side, a couple of different places. As we've seen this year, the growth of digital resources, not just curriculum, but this is also things like our food service, where we use technology to have our kids pay for their meals, and a lot of the other tools we use as an organization, from outside agencies scheduling the use of our facilities. We just see a growing need to support the technical tools, the online tools we use there, and so we're going to expand some staff there to provide that support. There are things that happen in the background with technology that I'm sure most people recognize. So, for example, when we purchase digital curriculum for our students, the data on the students has to come from someplace in order to upload into the new system. That is typically a linkage between PowerSchool, which is our student information system, to whatever the curriculum content is, and that needs constant updating because our students change teachers, they change classes, new kids come in, kids go out. So there's a lot of movement in the backside to make sure that when a teacher opens up that program, they have the right kids in there and have access. So same thing in food service, right? So we're going to add some support there. Going to add some support in transportation with our vans and bus drivers, and some support with our mechanics to keep those buses and vans safe and on the road. And as we saw this year, tremendous amount of pressure, around nursing with COVID chasing, all of the contact tracing we're doing, addressing the physical health of our students. We want to continue to grow that, so we'll add some support there in mental health and in social work, which unfortunately didn't make it on the slide. But those are 3 areas we know this year were important and will continue to be important parts of our work. I don't anticipate the impact of the pandemic on our students to just go away over the summer. In fact, I would anticipate that to some degree we're going to see ongoing, continued need to address those issues moving forward. So we're going to continue focusing that area. We're also going to look at, around mid-year, or as we get to summer, around mid-year, we will begin the process of identifying the principal of the new elementary school, which will open in the fall of 22. We want to have that person have the springtime for planning. They're going to have to hire a whole staff, put the whole building together, engage in the community. There's a lot of work that gets done going into that fall, and so we want to identify that person mid-year. So that'll be a new administrative position. Half of the salary will go into this coming school year, as well as support for secretarial support and custodial support as we get ready to open the building going into that new year. So you'll see some part-time positions in there that get hired later in the year. Remember, our fiscal year ends at the end of June. So that's a partial hire going into this year. And as I mentioned, the elementary principal, that's our only growth in the administrative area in terms of that position. So that's kind of a touch on some of the places we're going to be doing some hiring. If you flip to the next slide, Jill. So, of course, paying for it is a big part of that. And there's really 3 buckets of funds. And if Ms. Marshall wants to add anything to here, feel free. But we have our general fund. And as we continue to work on using our 5-year forecast as our kind of guidepost for future hires, we want to stay within the parameters and the assumptions that are built into our 5-year forecast for hiring, and we're doing that. We also are benefiting from Governor DeWine is renewing, going into this budget cycle, the student wellness and success funds that we've had before. We actually have some carryover that we're able to apply moving forward, and that's going to support some of the staffing. And then there's one position here that's unique. It's actually the social worker position That'll be funded through some grant work with our Educational Resource, our Educational Service Center, or ESC. So we have an ability to kind of add to our human resource capacity by having some additional funding resources and still keeping our 5-year forecast and our general fund on track for what we want to see in the future with the support of our community. So just kind of an overview of where we see needs, where we're going to do some hiring as it stands at this point, and we'll continue to work on that as we move along. So happy to answer any questions, but just want to let you know where we're headed.
John, can you just give me a little clarification on the special ed piece? I thought I heard you say you were going to do some hiring, but also leave maybe a place marker or a wiggle room in case numbers changed. So
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So the process of identification for special education services goes all year long.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's take an example. I'm going to use a very specific example. So let's take a low incident program, a unit that may have students where the ratio is, I'm going to make it up, eight students to one teacher. And so since it's a low incident program, we don't have that every building. We may have 2 or 3 units. There's a point at which if we have more students identified under that category, we're going to be out of compliance with the ratio of teachers to students. So that could happen in October. That could happen in November because the process of identification goes on all year. So we always know that what we see today and trying to project, particularly in special education, can fluctuate. And in order to make sure that we're in compliance, we need to keep that in mind as we move along. And that could be aides, which are sometimes part of that classroom experience, and that could be teachers. So we continue to monitor those.
So it sounds like it's a proactive hire.
Yeah, there'll be
Okay.
hiring we know we want to do now to meet what we see as current needs, projected needs based on what we know is in the pipeline, what we're seeing this year. And then always knowing that even what we identify to hire today for next year, we may be back in October talking about an additional position in order to meet new changes in those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question that might be more for Ms. Marshall. I'm just thinking about the different pots of funding and where we are in state budgeting, student wellness and success funds. So I'm just wondering if you can give everyone an update on how things are looking through the state budgeting process, and especially with the student wellness and success funds. That would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Altman. So the state is currently in the biennium budget process, so the governor released his budget with a commitment to continue the student wellness and success funds and actually increase that funding to school districts. We also have the Fair School Funding Plan, which is in play, and the House has introduced a variation of the Fair School Funding Plan from what we saw back in the fall. So still trying to work through all those changes. I actually have a webinar that I'm attending this Friday that will hopefully give some clarity to what that will look like. I do know just the difference between when we looked at simulations back in the fall versus now. It was based on older enrollment numbers, and now they're looking at the newer enrollment numbers with the 2020 where we were in the pandemic, and so we saw a little bit of enrollment decline. So it will go through the House's process, and then the Senate will also have their process, and then they'll have to go to conference committee and eventually come out with a product that the governor will put his signature on. So we're still very early in the process overall. I don't expect that we will know what that looks like or was finalized until right when it's due in June 30. So the last time we went through a biennium budget, they actually approved a temporary measure to get us through a period of a couple of weeks past the end of the fiscal year. I'm not quite certain what that will look like, but there is a commitment to continue the student wellness and success funds. There are some conversations around taking the student wellness and success funds and adding those to the Fair School Funding Plan to help fund that as well. So overall, we do expect those dollars to be there however it looks, we do expect there to be something there to help support the mental health and wellness piece.
Okay, thank you so much for doing a little status update. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. Agenda item 7.02, naming the buildings process. And Mr. V. Branch, would you please share with us this evening?
Good evening, President Bell, Vice President Dr. Nestor Baker, board members, Ms. Marshall, Dr. Kellogg. We're entering an exciting phase of our construction projects, and that is the establishment of the names and school colors and mascots for the 2 new schools. We thought this would be a good time to refresh our collective memories about what this process has looked like in the past and how we might choose to move forward in the future. Jill, next slide, please. So there's quite a bit of text on this page. I won't read it word for word, but it is important to note that there is a board policy that impacts the school naming process. Essentially, this policy states that if a school or an area of a facility is going to be commemorated for a person, the honor should be reserved for someone who has significantly contributed to or enhanced education in the district or in general. The honor could also be given to someone who has significantly contributed to the well-being of the district, of the community, the state, or the nation. And finally, if this honor is bestowed to someone who was an employee of the district, the individual must no longer be employed by the district or must be deceased. Jill, next slide, please. Thank you. Regarding past school naming conventions, our elementary schools traditionally have been named for literary figures such as poets and authors. They've also been named for streets and communities. The middle schools have been named for the townships in which they're located or for nearby geographic features. Next slide, please, Jill. So it's our recommendation at this time that everyone in the community should have the opportunity to propose a name for the new elementary school and the new middle school, as it was the broader community that approved the ballot issue that made these new facilities possible. Before launching this process, we should also make sure that we communicate whether or not we wish to follow past naming conventions or if there's a proposed change, if there are any names already under consideration, and most importantly, that the board will make the final determination on these facility names. Jill, next slide, please. Thank you. As for school mascots and colors, it's a tale of 2 approaches. While our elementary schools have a variety of mascots and school color combinations, there's been a bit more structure to the middle school approach. All of our middle schools use the same colors. They have a canine or a feline as their mascot, and the mascot has the same beginning sound of the school's name. Jill, next slide, please. Thank you. So another process consideration, it would be our recommendation that the opportunity to identify school mascots and colors should be limited to the students and the families that will be served by those schools. We can easily identify and engage those individuals. The selection of colors and mascots could be made by the popular vote of those who would choose to participate in that process. Next slide, please, Jill. Thank you. If, however, the board would prefer to open the selection of school colors and mascots to the greater community, we could certainly incorporate that opportunity into the outreach and engagement strategies that we would be using to solicit potential names for the schools. The timeline to complete these activities would be driven by certain steps in the overall construction process, such as when signs have to be ordered, when color schemes for paint and other decorative elements have to be finalized. We are very much looking forward to beginning this next step in the process. Thank you for your time this evening, and we'll take any questions or comments at this time.
Any questions?
So, Greg and Don, as we look toward where the building is in its construction process, where the middle school is in its construction process. And by the way, I was down by the elementary today, and it's so exciting. I go down there once a week by the building, and it's just wonderful to see how quickly it's coming together and how big it is. It's just delightful every time I go. But at any rate, it seems to me that it would be good to have these names identified and building that ownership that goes with names, building that awareness and comfort with names. So I would like to ask if you think it would be appropriate, as we think about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, to look toward a naming process in the fall and to do both buildings at the same time. Does that work within the calendar of thinking in this building?
I think so, and if Mr. Dorn's on the line, who's more in tune to the construction process, I think that timeline works well for some of the reasons that Mr. Rebrandt's hit on with once you start doing some of the finishes on inside of buildings and signage, it's important to have those things. So for us to do that in the fall is easy. We'll be back in, engage, and I think that timing works out well. Greg and Scott, what do you think?
I think the new elementary school should be completed in May of next year. So even though it doesn't open until August, it should be completed in the month of May. So the sooner the better on the new elementary, but I do like the concept of doing both of them at the same time. It will give us an opportunity at the middle school to be just a little more cohesive in terms of wall treatments and things like that. So I would push for the engagement to start in August, actually, rather than September or October.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know. And just weighing in on my thinking around the whole process, having been through the naming of some of our buildings, the idea of going out to the community. And I really appreciate your comments, Greg, about this belonging to the community. The community voted for these buildings, the community's paying for these buildings, and asking the community what they think good ideas for the names for the buildings is. I think that's a really important thing to do, and I hope that is what the board chooses to do. And then the idea of allowing those who will attend to have additional ownership by saying, hey, we were the inaugural classes here, and we identified colors, we identified mascots. That's a great way to build sense of community as well. So the processes that we used in the past have worked well, and I think would even be more effective now because we have additional channels to receive input from. So I'm actually really looking forward to this. It's a lot of fun to do this and to see what all the thinking is around the community, around how those buildings might be named, and then looking toward those mascots and so forth. And what we'll do, we got 3 dogs and a cat. We're going to have to figure out something that goes with 3 dogs and a cat for the middle school. But that's just me weighing in on my hopes and my thoughts. I would like to do it this year, sooner rather than later, as Scott said, and within the guidelines of the processes that this community has used very successfully in the past.
I just would affirm that. I think, Nancy, the way you outlined it, Greg, seems very solid to me. I like the wider community involved in the actual naming, and I like those particular school communities being involved in the mascotting and colors and just all of those pieces. I think it'd just be fun for them. And it's a good thing, it's not a high school because we've got north, central, south. We would have southwest, northeast, and, it could just get really complicated. So that's my thinking, such as it is.
I have just a quick question that I'm hoping somebody on here can answer about. I know that we have, defined those boundaries, but has there been a proactive communication out to families yet that we're aware of, that we know, live in areas where there's going to be schools? I'm just thinking through the process of where families and kids are in understanding who will be at the schools.
There hasn't been yet, and part of that has been intentional in that with all that's going on this school year, and all of the messages and information that's been shared, we don't want that important information to get lost in the fray. So there will be a more focused initiative to communicate directly with those families that will be attending those schools. And that's also the same list, obviously, that we would use to engage when it comes to the mascots and the colors and the fun stuff that goes along with starting school at a new building.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So Greg, I appreciate the history and tradition that you've laid out, and I completely think that we should support that and follow along with that. As far as a timeline and naming them together, I like that idea too. You guys are doing all the heavy lifting, so I would defer and see when you think it's best.
I think completing the process at the same time for both buildings would definitely be a good use of our resources and capacity. The ability to reach out to the community at the same time, solicit any ideas for your new elementary school, any ideas for your new middle school, separate those out and bring forward the ones that rise to the top. I think certainly is a better use of our time than going through the process twice, two different portions of the academic year.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, thanks, Greg. Moving on to agenda item 8.01, public comments. We have not received any at this point that relate to a specific agenda item. So moving on to agenda item 9.01, a resolution to approve the purchases in accordance with ORC 5705.41D1 and Board Policy 6320. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Marshall, would you like to share with us about this, please?
Yes, thank you, President Bell, members of the board. So this is then and now purchase order. So we had some bus parts that were returned, and the credit did not get back on in time for the new invoice because we had replacement parts that replaced the parts that we returned. So we did have the money budgeted. We have since had the credit applied. So this is just a timing issue.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestraker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Agenda item 9.02, approval of the financial report and investments for March of 2021. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
You can have it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Marshall, would you share with us, please?
Yes, thank you again, President Bell, members of the board. So we are going over the March 31, 2021 month-end financials. For the general fund, we had year-to-date receipts of $175.3 million and year-to-date expenditures of $139.1 million. We ended with an unencumbered general fund balance of $158.6 million. For all funds, we had year-to-date receipts of $231.2 million, year-to-date expenditures of $210.9 $178.8 million. And we ended with unencumbered fund balances for all funds totaling $278.9 million. I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Okay. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velarde,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 10, the personnel consent agenda that is comprised of agenda items 10.01 through 10.10. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Mazzi, would you like to share with us about the personnel consent agenda?
Absolutely. Well, good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. I'd like to present to you for your consideration the personnel consent agenda. As you can see, the items contained within, for the most part, are through the normal course of daily business. However, some items that I think deserve to be highlighted. We do have a retirement to celebrate. We have Marianne Corder with 28 years of service to our district. So, join me in thanking her for her years of service to the student, staff, and the community of the Westerville City Schools. We have several license resignations that you probably saw. I want you to again say that they're not leaving Westerville to leave Westerville, but rather because many are relocating. We probably had more relocations this year than I've seen in my years here. So just want to make sure the board doesn't feel it's a reflection on the district at all. Few change of assignments for classified. You'll see secretarial support to assist us over the summer for preparations. Again, normal summer work. You'll see several change of assignments for folks. So again, we've had some reading positions open up, some teachers on special assignment, instructional coaches open. So we try to get staff from within the district that are doing a great job for us and our students to get those positions. Obviously, they express interest, and we certainly support that. And then you'll see some of our first hires for the 21-22 school year on this agenda. So we're really excited about that. As we were stating earlier, already looking forward to next year. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mazzi.
Thank you.
Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velarde,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 11. I'd like to combine items 11.01 through 11.08 as a consent calendar item. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, discussion?
I just have a quick clarification question. Looking through some of these policies the second time, I came across the term compliance officer, and I was just wondering, for the public's knowledge, where would one find a compliance officer?
Well, that's a great question, Ms. Davison. The good news about that is if you go to the Westerville City Schools website and search, you go in the search tool and type in compliance officer, it will take you to several areas within the district where that information can be extracted under different departments. And for parents and students, the good news is that the information is listed in each handbook that's developed at the district. So I think that folks that need that would have every opportunity to be able to get it under the website. If it's not the search, it's under our operations section to health and safety. Which falls underneath that, and then a link to the compliance officer. So Little known, but that's a great question. Thank goodness we don't have to use it often.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others? Okay, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velarde,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda items 12, new business. Agenda item 12.01, a first reading for policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. Mr. Mazzy, would you share with us about this?
Well, thank you again, President Bell. Policy 2260 as described, non-discrimination, access to equal opportunity. Again, revising this to reflect changes in terminology, definitions, processes, and procedures that are consistent with the latest regulations. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 12.02, actually 12.02 and 12.03, since these are first readings. Policy 2260.01, section 504, ADA prohibition against discrimination based on disability, and agenda item 12.03, policy 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities. Dr. Hopkins, would you please share with us regarding these two policies?
Yes, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. This evening I present to you the first reading for two very important policy revisions for your consideration. The first is the revision, as you stated, to policy 2260.01, and this revision seeks to update existing policy language. Some of the examples of the proposed revisions include the following: the use of people first language, clarification of a free and appropriate public education to students, and defining retaliation against a person who makes a report. The second revision is to policy 2266. This policy has been revised to reflect the following. It provides an updated definitions for sexual assault, identifies who the board designates as its Title IX coordinator, updates language around the grievance and determination of responsibility processes, and finally explains the application of the First Amendment regarding this policy. Both of these revisions are recommended for adoption to ensure we have and maintain accurate policies.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Dr. Hopkins? Okay, thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Moving on to agenda item 13.01, donations. May I please have a motion and a second to receive these donations?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? We certainly want to thank everyone who has so generously donated these goods and services to our district. And with that, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velarde,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. Motion carries. Agenda item 13.02, general service contract between Licking County Educational Service Center and Westerville City Board of Education for fiscal year 2020 through 2021 school year. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Hopkins, would you like to share with us about this, please?
Certainly, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall, the general services contract that you have before you allows Westerville schools to partner with Licking County ESC to, when appropriate, provide educational services to our students with learning differences. We recommend that this be passed in the event these opportunity is necessary.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Hopkins?
Dr. Hopkins, sometimes I think people who might watch these proceedings, we use a lot of initials. There's TOSA, there's ESC, there's all that. Can you give people who may not know at all, what is an ESC? What do they do? Why do we link with them? Just to help the community understand.
That's a great question. ESC stands for an Educational Service Center. And here in Ohio, there are predominantly around all of our counties. Some of them are regional around larger cities. And the goal of the Educational Service Center is to provide resources to school districts like Westerville when there might be incidences where just Westerville alone has such a small incidence of students with learning differences who need a particular service. So what the Educational Service Center oftentimes will do will be able to host a program where students from Westerville and other surrounding districts can kind of join forces, if you will, to attend a program that's suited for their needs. But because of the sheer number of incidences, is just not practical for the individual school district to host by itself.
Thank you. It's very helpful. I just, one of the things I'm thinking of over the next X period of time, this communication liaison, is I'd like to periodically just have us explain to the community some of the language that we use. Before I was on the board, I didn't know any of that. Some might say I still don't know any of that, but I just think we need to help people understand what we're doing, and this is a very good thing to do. So, Paul, thank you. That's all.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
President Bell, before I do that, I just want to mention it is for the 21-22 school year that you're voting on. That was an error on the agenda. So.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Velarde?
Yes.
Dr. Nussbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 13.03, joint resolution utilizing the ESC of Central Ohio's Business Advisory Council. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, and Dr. Kellogg, would you like to share with us about this?
Thank you, President Bell, members of the board. Now that we have, the board has acted on the change in board policy in terms of our Business Advisory Council, we need to pass a resolution. And to Mr. Velardo's point, there is that ESC thing again in the works. So one of the other functions of the ESC, the Educational Service Center, is to convene school districts around shared interest. And in this case, it's our Business Advisory Council. So this resolution now puts into action your action around the board policy. So this is just moving us forward with partnering with local school districts through the ESC on a Central Ohio Business Advisory Council in conjunction with our local Business Advisory Council. This just gives us access to additional resources.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velarde?
Yes.
Dr. Nussbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Agenda item 13.04, a resolution approving construction documents stage submission for the new middle school included in the ELPP project. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Mr. Dorn, would you share with us about this, please?
Good evening, President Bell, Vice President Dr. Nestor Baker, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. The resolution presented here is for the construction document phase approval for the new middle school project. The CD phase is the final phase submission, with the program of requirements, schematic design, and design development planning phases having already been previously approved by the board. As previously noted, these projects are part of our Expedited Local Partnership Program project with the OFCC, and it is required for the board to approve each phase of the design. The design phase first goes to the OFCC's regional program consultant for review for compliance with the OFCC's Ohio School Design Manual and for identification of the locally funded initiatives before coming to the board for approval. This project has met the OFCC standards and is now before you. It is being recommended that the board approve the construction document stage submissions for the new middle school project and authorize the superintendent and other administrators to proceed with bidding the project.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion? Okay. Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 13.05, 2021 through 2022 student handbooks. May I please have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Meisner, would you like to share with us, please, about the student handbooks?
Certainly. Good evening, President Bell, members of the board. The Handbook Committee meets to review our student handbooks and make recommendations for any desired revisions. The only revision recommended this year was offered by Greg V. Brands. The suggestion reflected a change in student attendance necessitated by the district-wide use of the Safe Arrival Attendance Technology System. Approved revisions will go in effect to start the 2021-22 school year. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
No questions, but Deb, this is the last time you're going to do this. No more handbook approvals for you.
I'm smiling.
I thought you would be.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Meisner. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 14.01, public comments of a general nature. We have received two public comments, and I will read them. The first comes from John Walden and says, I write to express disappointment and concern about Westerville South's, the district's cancellation and the speed of its cancellation of the approved Kendrick Lamar IB English unit at Westerville South. The cancellation of this approved curriculum unit for this year and the apparent prospective cancellation reportedly occurred because of a small smattering of complaints, including one from a substitute, parenthetically, though perhaps full-time South Building teacher. This cancellation is troubling as in initial matter because the district recently highlighted this unit on its website. Kendrick Lamar lesson at Westerville South explores poetry, music, and social movement, Westerville City Schools. If it was an approved curriculum and recently celebrated, then why and how was it so easily canceled? If, as reported, it happened due to a couple of complaints, then that raises further serious concerns about the disparate treatment the district uses when it evaluates curriculum complaints from non-people of color. But before addressing that further, perhaps the district needs to go read its own article and take it to heart. Kendrick Lamar provides an outlet for students to learn something from standard. Kendrick allows an accessible way to talk about poetry and give students a safe place to talk about heavier topics such as institutional racism and white privilege. Kendrick Lamar is a Pulitzer Prize winner. Is the district scared to address these issues? There exists no legitimate reason why the already approved Kendrick Lamar lesson plan should not be reinstated immediately and supported for the opportunities it offers. And if there are concerns, then perhaps have some conversations to touch on them. But a quick cancellation teaches nothing but intolerance and perhaps further evidences the systemic racism issues facing our district and community. The district and board should also question that if a small number of complaints, perhaps two, were all that was received, what was the justification for the cancellation? Was it language? Was it a certain word? If so, then has the district used the same standards in evaluating books or concerns raised by students of color about more traditional books? There seem to be different standards. That is troubling. That is wrong. As a parent and community member, I expect and indeed demand more. Again, the Kendrick Lamar unit should be reinstated immediately and a conversation held with the students in class explaining the situation is warranted. The class should also be offered on a continuing basis. And those are the end of Mr. Walden's comments. The next comment comes to us from Nicole Kirkland, and her comment reads as follows. It has come to my attention that one high school in our district does not have the same safety equipment in place that the other two high schools have in place. How does the district justify this? What does it take to get all high school athletics on the same playing field from a safety equipment perspective? So I want to thank Ms. Kirkland and Mr. Walden for submitting comments this evening. And they will be followed up with at a later time. Agenda item 15.01, board comments. Is there anyone who would like to begin?
I'd like to give John an opportunity to update us on the Kendrick Lamar issue at South.
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Davidson, members of the board. I have Mr. Reeves and Mr. Mazzi investigating the matter, see what the issue is. There was no decision from the district office or the board to cancel any portion of the curriculum. I'm still trying to get information regarding conversations between the teacher and administration.
Okay. Could we also look into the second comment of Nicole Kirkland's safety?
Yeah, we'll follow up with her and try and get more specifics as what she sees as the discrepancy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick thank you to all of our A+ winners. Congratulations and thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Ms. Altman?
Yeah, thanks. I also wanted to just congratulate and thank our A+ award winners. I'm sure everyone up here does. We just so appreciate, as they said, especially this year, all the work that happens from those staff members and all staff members across the district. So thank you for everything you do for kids every day. And Dr. Kellogg, regarding Mr. Walden's comment and the Kendrick Lamar unit, thank you for following up. As a board member, I'd really appreciate, as part of that follow-up, having additional conversations about board policy and procedure and how sort of all these things fit together related to teacher discretion and choice in classroom, because, you know, we have approved curricula sometimes that are sort of really laid out, and then we have some courses where our wonderful educators get to use their professional discretion to bring other materials. In this case, my understanding is this is material that was listed on the IB list, on their list of possible choices. So in any case, I appreciate that as we follow up, helping me and the public understand sort of how those policy and procedure pieces fit together in the situation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Villardo?
Thank you, Reverend Bell. Just a great thank you to both people who wrote in. Appreciate John, Mr. Walden's comments, and certainly want to follow up, see what's going on there. And I've forgotten her name, the lady who wrote in about the disparity in safety, apparently safety equipment. We definitely want to address that. The shout out to the A+ award winners. Always great to recognize just the outstanding work that's done in this district. And I can tell you, I was blessed to serve on that committee, and everybody that was nominated could have won. It was just, there were really some outstanding people doing some incredible work in what is, and what's the word, President Bell? Unprecedented year? Isn't that the word we keep using? So, what's that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, that is the word. And I'm grateful to be serving alongside these colleagues. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Nestor Baker.
I want to say thank you and congratulations to the A+ award winners. Some remarkable people in there, as there always are. It is so hard to identify a small handful of people to receive the awards that we do give out, knowing the other huge handful that are left out there that may not have been nominated yet. So the next time the A+ award nominations are open, please be sure to nominate your favorite educator and provide some good information there. As you saw in Jill Beck's presentation tonight, the people who received the award this time are absolutely phenomenal. And I think it's a joy to have them in this district. And I thank them for being part of Westerville Schools. As regards the two public comments, I'm not aware of discrepancy in the safety equipment, so I'm also looking forward to some information about that. Thank you, Dr. Kellogg, for saying you'll provide that to us. As regards the curricular issue, I think a discussion about our curriculum policies is probably a good idea. I think there is, as is not unusual in policies, some clarification around what the language says, what the language means, what give and take is available within those policies, not just about the issue that was raised by Mr. Walden, but in general, as issues do come up. And it also helps us because curricular policies overlap with other policies within our district. And as we look at how our policies form a Venn diagram around curriculum and around the text used in delivering the curriculum that's approved by the district. All of that goes into decision making and the identification of what is and is not academic freedom, what is and is not an approved text within the district approved by the Board of Education. And it's also muddied further when we work with an organization such as the International Baccalaureate Program, or when we work with, for instance, our college partners who have specific courses of study that they use, the syllabi that they use for the courses that we are engaged with as partners with them. There are issues related to that that require give and take and some clear understanding of what is actually included in our policies, what is actually included in the courses or the courses of study that we are partnering with. So there are lots of layers to these issues and a lot of understanding that goes to the entirety of the district. And Dr. Kellogg, I look forward to hearing more information from you about the issue itself. As we probably all have, I've heard a number of comments about it from people who are in favor of that unit continuing and from people who most definitely are not. So I'm interested in what you learn in your review of what has occurred there and shedding some daylight on what's going on so that we don't run the risk of succumbing to too many rumors. So thank you for that, Dr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Dr. Mr. Baker. I would just like to add my congratulations to everyone else's, to the A-plus winners. Also want to thank Jill Beck for all of the hard work behind the scenes that went into putting together the presentation for this evening's board meeting. I would also like to thank all of those. I was reading down through the donations earlier. Again, thank all of our community partners for how you assist and contribute to education here in the West School District. Also, congratulations to our retirees that were a part of the consent agenda this evening. Thank you for so many years of faithful and tremendous service to our students and to our community. Moving on in our agenda to agenda item 16.01, the time, dates, and locations of our next meeting. The board will meet for a virtual meeting on Monday, May the 10th, 2021 at 6 o'clock p.m. at the Early Learning Center, 936 East Wind Drive, Westerville, Ohio, 43081. Agenda item 17, executive session. The board will move into executive session for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, and reviewing negotiations with employees regarding their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. And with that, the board will move into executive session and will return here to adjourn.
7:20.
We are returning from executive session, and at this time, we'll move on to agenda item 18.01, adjournment. May I please have a motion and a second?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velarde?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries, and we are adjourned.